And ladies and gentlemen, is how you keep a storyteller on their feet.
For a long time, there was a storytelling festival in Mariposa, California. And as part of that, we would go to Yosemite National Park, and we would get to tell stories in Yosemite National Park. And we took a tour of Yosemite one year, and I was standing at the base of Yosemite Falls. I was with a retired ranger who was giving us the tour. Now, let me just preface all of this by saying, you might not know this by looking at me, but I am the kind of person who, without even trying, can find the most difficult way to do something. So I was talking to this retired ranger, and I said, how tall is that falls? And he said, 2,425 feet. And I said, no, I don't mean above sea level. I mean from the bottom to the top of the falls. He said, 2,425 feet. He said, but it's not quite straight down, but you wouldn't feel much after the first bump. And I thought, 2,425 feet. That's about a half a mile. I said, is there a trail to the top? And he said, sure. Like he used to do it on his lunch hour. And I said, how long's the trail? He said, about 3.5 miles. He said, it's actually 2,700 feet to the top, and then you have to descend a little bit. He said, but you might have to do some post-holing. And I said, sure. Now, when you tell me something that you think I need to know, and my response to you is, sure. You can bet your bottom $50 that I have no idea what you're talking about. Now, I wasn't staying at the park. I was staying in Mariposa, and I had to do a school in the morning, go and do a school show, and so but I didn't have anything that evening. So I figured I could go do my school show in the morning, and then be at the park by 1 o'clock, and then I could take this hike. Now, I jog, and I can jog in almost any terrain. I can do a mile in 10 minutes in almost any conditions if I'm properly outfitted. So 3.5 mile trail, I should be able to do that in 35 minutes, right? Now it occurred to me that this wasn't going to be normal conditions, and maybe some of this was going to be uphill. So let's say I had to walk a little. I can still walk a 15-minute mile in almost any conditions. So let's say I figured it's going to take me an hour and 10 minutes, tops, to get to the top of the falls. Which meant that I still had to come down, but that's downhill. So we're talking 30 minutes. And if I wanted to look around a little bit at the top of the mountain, let's say 2 hours. 2 hours maximum for this hike. So if I start at 1 o'clock, I should be done by 3 o'clock. The sun set at 7 o'clock. That gave me 4 hours to spare. So when I did the school, I got in my car, I drove to the park, I was at the trailhead at 1 o'clock, I dressed in the car. Wool socks, running pants, what Barbara might call yoga tights, but I call them running pants. A short sleeve t-shirt, a long sleeve moisture wicking shirt, a light jacket, and my running shoes. And then I got out of the car and I went to the water pump and I drank about a gallon of water, because that was all the water I was taking with me on this trip, right? He who travels light travels fast, but you have to pee a lot. And then I started right about 1 o'clock, and immediately I passed this couple, this older couple, coming down the mountain, and they clearly took hiking seriously. They had on, everything they were wearing was LL Bean and Patagonia and Columbia, and they had those stupid ski poles that they were swinging rhythmically like this. They were at the bottom of the trail, and I could tell just by looking at them that they had topographic maps with them, and that they had pre-planned their hike, and that they had designated, before going up, where they were going to rest and how long they were going to rest. And in their pockets there were protein bars and compressed bandages and Israeli quick clotting medicine in case they cut themselves. And they had reflective survival blankets and solar panels for their portable yurt, and compasses and flashlights, they had headlamps on. I was pretty sure somewhere in their pockets they had little baggies of their own waste that they had carried down the mountain. And they looked at me with scorn. You know what, they had started before dawn, and they were looking at me like, you're never going to make it up there before dark, young man. I don't know if they thought young man, but I like to think they thought young man. I had, along with what I told you I was wearing, my 74 function Swiss Army type knife, a lighter, and my driver's license, so they could identify my remains. I started up the trail. Now, here's the thing. The trail is 3.5 miles long. So you can go 2,700 feet. So you go 3.5 miles is roughly 18,500 feet. So to go 2,700 feet, you have to go 18,500 feet. Now, let's talk about this for a minute. If you took the Sears Tower, put it on top of itself, not including little pokey things, that's about 2,800 feet. If you build a trail, a gradual trail, from the top of that, your 2,800 foot double Sears Tower, 3.5 miles out, that trail would start 2.5 miles out in Lake Michigan, and there would be a gradual, if annoying, ascent. And you would go up about 1 foot for every 6 feet that you take. But the Yosemite Falls Trail is not named correctly, because it is not a trail. It does not start 2.5 miles away from the top. It starts a mile from where you're going. So again, it's a little confusing, but you go up 1/2 mile in a 1 mile trail. You have to go 3.5 miles. So how can that be? Well, because the Yosemite Trail, as I said, is not a trail. It goes impossibly up. It is a spiral staircase that goes into a fire escape that turns into a ladder that then goes into like the stairs that go up a steeple. There are some switchbacks that occasionally let you take 2 steps in the same direction, and then it's topped by an ice-covered sliding board. If you look at the topographic map of the Yosemite Falls Trail, the contour lines look like your thumbprint. They are that close together. I don't care how big you blow that map up. They're as big as your thumbprint. And the trail comes down and it looks like a diagram of electricity. It looks like an electrocardiogram. It looks like the EKG of someone in vascular fibrillation. It just kind of goes like this. It is the most ridiculous steep trail you ever encountered in your life. And I was thinking maybe it's going to take me more than 10 minutes a mile. But I started up, and I was passing people. I was moving, passing people left and right. People were going up, people were coming down. And not everybody was dressed like the ridiculous older couple I had seen at the beginning of the trail. Some of these people were just dressed in casual clothes. You know, they were at a national park. They had never intended to get out of their car. But then they'd seen something pretty, so they thought they'd take a little walk. And some people were dressed like they were, serious hikers. And some people, like there was this one guy standing in the middle of the path. He had on a New Jersey Knicks or a New York Knicks t-shirt, and he was wearing cut-off corduroys, and he had no socks and dock shoes on. And I swear, he was standing there. People were going by him like he was standing on Madison Avenue. And I think he was thinking to himself, I didn't even know the A train went to Yosemite. So there were people worse off than me. I was moving. Some people had stopped to rest on this trail, but I had a time schedule. I was going up. I made the first mile in about 10 minutes. Now, my wife loves to hike. I love to hike. But my wife and I have opposing ideas on what makes a good hike. Here's what I think a good hike is: getting from the starting point to the ending point as quickly as possible. That is what a hike is for. Somebody built that trail for me to go and set a record. My wife thinks you should stop and look at stuff. I'll turn around. She'll be like 4.5 miles behind me, taking her 2,074th selfie, you know? She likes to look at the plant. She got an app. She can point it at a plant. I'll tell her what kind of plant it is. I'm moving. I want to get this thing done. She said, we're going to go hike with my friend Susie and her husband. I had never met Susie or her husband. But she said her husband is a lot like you, only less patient. Oh, well, that's the nicest thing you can think to say about both of us. That's horrible. So, I'm going, I'm moving. But honestly, in that first mile, because that trail's so steep, there's not a lot to look at. It's forested anyway, so you can't really see much. But you have to understand that this trail, it's like climbing a ladder. So you got to keep your eyes on the trail. But that's not hard, because the trail's right here. So you're making it, but you get up about 1,600 feet, and then it flattens out for a little bit, and you go another half mile, and you come out of the trees, and you can see the falls. You're halfway up the trail, and you can see the falls, but you can also see half of the Yosemite Valley, and it is absolutely beautiful. You're at Columbia Rock, and you can see Half Dome out there, and you can see Sentinel Rock out there, and it is absolutely incredible. And then, just maybe not even 100 yards away, you can see the falls, and there's water coming down, and the mist is coming at you. You can feel the mist, and it is absolutely beautiful. I entirely encourage you to go take that trip. And it turns out that that is where most people turn around. That's enough for most people. I should tell you that in the brochure, which I read after I had done this hike, it said that the terrain for this hike is extremely rough, and that you should plan 12 hours to take this hike. So it is, like 15 after 1 by now. I still have plenty of time. I only had 2.5 miles to go. So this is where most people are satisfied with this view of Yosemite Falls. Most people get that far, take a look around, think they've accomplished something, turn around, go back down. Most people are smarter than me. So I still wanted to go the next 2.5 miles up this trail. It also turns out that this is about where the snow line starts. Now, it wasn't snowing, but there was plenty of snow on the ground for the rest of the trip. But enough people, not everybody keeps going, but enough people have gone on from that point that the trail was compacted down. So I was walking about, the trail, I was on flat ground, but then the snow on either side of the trail was about up to my knees. So I'm walking up that, and now it's getting a little bit steeper. This is the sliding board covered in ice part of the trip, and it's getting steeper and steeper and steeper. And I noticed that there were these weird holes on both sides of the trail in the snow. They're maybe like 1/2 inch in diameter, and there'd be 3 of them together, sometimes 4 of them together, and then sometimes there'd be 5, with the 5th one just a couple of inches away from the other 4. And I was like, what is this? Is this like some sort of Arctic snow worm that lives in the Sierra Mountains, or is it some kind of, California ice clam? And as I was running through these possible explanations for what this might be, I slipped, and I reached out to stop myself, and my fingers went right into the snow. And I realized that hundreds of people had fallen before me and done that exact same thing. So now I'm climbing up this trail. And by this point, I was easily doing 6 miles an hour. But they were treadmill miles, because my feet weren't going anywhere on this ice. I was just spinning out on this ice, pulling myself up that. I got to where that eventually ends, came around the corner, and then I could see the trail going up the mountain in front of me in a series of very, very tight, very, very close switchbacks, steep. And I could also see off to this side was a drop-off. Now, it wasn't a fall 1,000 feet and die drop-off. It was more like a fall 10 feet onto some jagged rocks and hope that someone comes to save you before you die drop-off. And then ahead of me was this cliff face with this path carved out. And now you need to know that this trail was built between 1873 and 1877. It took 4 years to make a 3.5 mile trail. That is 14 feet a day. Now, if you figure those guys, maybe they took a couple of days off, maybe they took off the weekends and holidays, that's still only 26 feet a day. That's how tough that trail was to make. Now, I did find out later that it wasn't like a crew of CCC guys that built the trail. It was one guy. He built the first mile in a year, and then he took 3 years off and finished the rest of it because he was tired. So, it goes up, and as I told you, the trail was covered in snow. The surface of the trail was snow, and I thought that snow went all the way down to the ground. But as I looked at that cross-section of trail, just like you can see the front of this stage, I could see the trail in front of me. I could see the switchback going up the mountain, and there was snow on the surface of the trail, but some of the snow had melted, but it hadn't melted off the top of the trail. It had melted from the bottom of the trail. So in many places, maybe 1 foot high and 4 or 5 feet long, there were snow arches underneath, or open spaces underneath the trail that were covered by these snow ices, these snow bridges. And I thought, if I walk up that, those are going to collapse, and I'm going to fall down into this deathly pointy rock thing, and I don't want to fall into the deathly pointy rock thing, so I didn't walk, I ran. And I finally got to the top, like at about 2,000 feet, maybe 2,400 feet, the trail quits going unremittingly up. It doesn't flatten out, but it's more normal, what we might call a hill. I was running a race in Alabama, where was it? Athens, Alabama, and a 5K race, and we got to the end of it, and all these Alabamians were panting, and they were like, man, that hill at the end almost killed me. You know, I live in South Charleston. It looks a lot like this. I was like, what hill was that? And they were like, the last 20 yards. And it was, maybe. Anyway, it kind of flattens out. Now, by this time, I was getting close to the top, but I didn't, now it's probably, maybe an hour and a half into my hike that I thought was going to be 2 hours long, and I wasn't up, and I still had to go down. And I started to wonder just how much longer it was going to take me to get there. And I thought maybe I should ask someone how far I am from the top. Now, you have to be careful when you do this, because you have to find someone who's, seems like they're about at your same physical fitness level. Because if I were to ask an Olympic biathlon how much further to the top, she's going to be like, 6 minutes. But that's going to be unrealistic, because she's in better shape than I am. And if I ask someone who's in less shape than I am, well, they're not going to, that's going to be wrong too. So then I thought, let me just find somebody who looks kind of like me. And then I realized there was nobody else on the trail. It occurred to me that I hadn't seen anyone coming up or down for at least the last half an hour. And then I started to think, because not only can I make the hardest, can I do things in the hardest way possible, I'm also a world-class warrior. And I started to think, maybe did I accidentally pass a gate that said no one past this point after 1 o'clock? And was the trail closed? Was there something wrong? And then finally, I saw a guy coming my way. He was about my size, about my shape, about my age. And so I said, how much further to the top? And he said, you're going to need a torch. He was Australian. I'm not going to try and do his accent because I don't want to put him to shame, because mine would be so much better. So he said, you're going to need a torch. And I said, thanks. And he said, cheers, mate. And we went our separate ways. And I stood there. Here I was in this glorious place. I was in Yosemite National Park. John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt had stood in that place. The sun was out. It was beautiful. It was 55 degrees. I could see all these beautiful things. And all I could think was, I have now, for the first time in my life, been officially and validly cheers mated. I thought, what else can go better for me this day than to have an actual Great Britain, Australian person say to me, cheers, mate. And then I started thinking, he said I was going to need a torch. I thought, that's goofy. Clearly that guy's a foreigner, because everybody knows you can't carry a torch in the woods in California. You'll burn the whole place down. And I was walking away, giggling about walking through the California woods with a torch. And it made me think of a time I was at the Sierra Nevada Storytelling Festival, also in California. And I was walking in the Yuma National Forest. And I was behind these 2 young women. And there were helicopters doing a grid pattern above us. And one of the young ladies said to the other young lady, what do you think those helicopters are doing? And she said, either someone's hurt, there's a fire, or they found someone's marijuana patch. And the first girl said, well, I sure hope somebody's hurt. And then I realized that man, when he said torch, that's like English for flashlight. And I thought, when I said, how far to the top, he said, you're going to need a torch. What he meant was there was no way I was going to make it before dark. And I giggled again, because I didn't have a flashlight. So, now I'm crossing this sort of open tundra. I'm walking on top of the frozen snow. Going across it, I can see the summit. It's just not that far away. I also realize there's no other footprints where I'm walking. So I assume I'm now off the trail. And then, as I'm walking across this frozen snow, I found out what post holing is. Post holing is when you're walking across frozen snow and the surface breaks and your leg sinks into the snow like a post falling into a hole. Now, fortunately, the snow wasn't that deep. It was only about thigh high. But both of my legs had gone through. And this is when I was really happy that I wasn't wearing hiking boots. I was wearing running shoes. Because the hiking boots would have been a whole lot harder to get out of those holes. So now I'm post-holing like the last 100 yards. I make it to the top. I make it to the summit. I'm 2,700 feet up now. And I can hear Yosemite Creek. I could even see Yosemite Creek, and I could hear the falls for sure, but I couldn't see the falls. I was a little disappointed. I came all this way. And then I remembered that the guy told me that you had to hike down a little bit. So I made my way around. I post-holed around this big boulder, and then you come around that big boulder, you go down about 300 feet, and you can see it. You're right where the water starts to arch, starts to crest over the edge. There's 2,400 gallons of water a second coming off the edge of that falls. And someone, I don't know, probably these same guys, someone had built, just carved into the cliff face, a stairwell, and then a tiny little platform, maybe a quarter the size of this stage, with a railing around it. But when you have 2,400 gallons of water a second falling off a cliff, there's a lot of mist. There were 1 million rainbows in front of me. Now it was absolutely beautiful, but a lot of that mist had come over and landed on those stairs. And so they were just an ice sheet. And I knew if I got going too fast down those stairs, I was going right off that platform, and then I was going to fall 2,425 feet. But after I hit the first bump, it wasn't going to matter that much. But don't worry, there was a handrail. Now it was covered in ice, but I did manage to make my way down there. And again, I don't want to tell you what to do with your life. Hike that trail. Give yourself a couple more hours, but hike that trail. Don't do it in March when it's 55 degrees, but hike that trail. It is incredible to stand up there at the top of that falls and watch that water just pouring over there. You can look down. It's funny because you're up there, you're 2,425 feet above the ground. I could see the trailhead 2,425 feet below me, but somehow it was 3.5 miles away. I mean, it was right there, but it was 3.5 miles away. And that's when I started to think, well, I still need to get down, don't I? And so I pull myself up those ice stairs, and by this time, my hands were freezing. I don't know if you realize I wasn't wearing gloves. My shoes were frozen. My pants were close to frozen. I was a little bit thirsty. I was tired and cold, but I was happy because I had accomplished something. And I came around that boulder, and there was a man about my age, and what I assumed was his son. Now his son looked like a snowboarder kind of, skateboarder kind of guy, and they looked disappointed. And I said, "Don't worry. All you gotta do is go around this boulder, just follow my post holes, and you'll be able to see where the falls goes over the cliff." And the young man said to me, "Thanks for the gnarly gratidatus, dude." And how often do you hear that, right? I've been cheers made it and gnarly gratidatus, dude thanked. So I started down, and it was easier to go down than it was to go up, but it wasn't simple. And I was passing people. Now people were coming up, and I thought to myself, they started this trail too late. And then I thought, no, you're not allowed to think that, right? I wasn't going to look scorn at these people like the old couple at the bottom had looked at me. And plus, you could tell it didn't matter to some of these people. I mean, not that anyone would have been able to talk sense into me, but I passed this group of guys that were wearing Minnesota Twins tank tops. And I could just tell there was no sense telling those guys you're never going to make it to the top before dark. Because if you told those guys, wait, stop, 100 yards up the trail, they're exploding dynamite to cause an avalanche to kill a fire-breathing dragon. Those guys would have been like, oh geez, don't want to miss that, let's go, you know? So, I passed this young couple, they were younger than me, and there's no way I was going to tell them that they weren't going to make it to the top before dark. Because I could see by the expression on that young man's face that he had been hearing that since before they left the house. He didn't need to hear. And I'm going down. It took me almost an hour to get down the trail. That's how steep this trail is. An hour, it's ridiculous. They go 3.5 miles. And I got to the bottom, or close to the bottom. And, I was thinking about how thirsty I was. And I was also trying to remember if I'd hidden my keys somewhere at the bottom, or if I'd lost them post-hauling at the summit. And I got behind these two young ladies, who I think were speaking French. I don't know French, but it seemed like French to me. And the only words that I could pick out of their conversation was flippy-flops. Like, I think they meant flip-flops, like the shoe wear. And I looked, and they were not wearing flippy-flops, but they said flippy-flops several times in their conversation. And all I could, deduce from the rhythm of the conversation was that they were discussing whether they were glad that they had not, or whether they wished that they had worn flippy-flops on this trail. And maybe that's what this whole story is about, right? I mean, maybe sometimes we climb 18,500 feet in 5,280 feet so that we can go 2,425 feet so that we can see something from the opposite perspective. And some people, when they do that, they see God. And some people just feel a great sense of accomplishment. Some people check something off their to-do list. Some people just feel relieved that they made it up and back. And some people just think to themselves, I'm sure glad I didn't wear flip-flops. Right?